In this episode, we're going to be installing the ASA software on a Firepower appliance currently running the Ftd, or Firepower Threat Defense software, and then back to Ftd. One of the first things we should do is start and bring up a Tftp server. I have one here from SolarWinds. The trivial file transfer protocol has been used and is still used to push and pull files from network devices. As you see here, I have a file named Cisco ASA FP1K 9.15.1.10, basically the Firepower 1000 series ASA software. When I open the Tftp server properties, you'll see if the service is started, if you want a tray icon, and timeout if things don't work well, as well as the location of the files that the server will work from. As you see here, this is the location we are working from in Tftp. So we must download the file from software.cisco.com and then place it in the Tftp root folder. So let's log into the Firepower appliance, the default user of admin and its password. You'll notice right away we are running the Cisco Firepower 1010 Threat Defense software version 6.7.0 build 65. Once we have logged in, we change the scope to firmware. We can try a couple things here, but in the end we must use the command download image, then specify the location. The server 10.0.100.100 is the IP address of my workstation running the Tftp server. Once you run this command, you can use either show download task or show download task detail to check its progress. As you see here, we are currently downloading the image we want. Sometimes you may get a failure. We might have to try it a couple times to get it to work. You may also see some weirdness, especially from the direct console connection we have here. In my troubleshooting, there are many issues that may occur. As you may have noticed, the Tftp server didn't show any connections. The Windows firewall was preventing the connection from Tftp. We could go through and add Tftp, which is the way you might want to set it up in an enterprise. But for simplicity's sake, let's just turn the Windows firewall off. Now we can try the command again. You'll notice that the Tftp server GUI shows a connection on UDP port 69. Once the download is complete, you'll see a verifying image statement appear. It may take a while to download and verify as the files are getting increasingly large. This file seems to be over 400 megabytes in size. We'll close a couple of these screens as they are no longer needed. And here we go, verification completed successfully. Using the show download task command again shows us the state, and it now shows downloaded. The show package command will list the available packages that can be installed. ASA software, Firepower Threat Defense, and of course the FX OS software, which is the base software, and ASA will run on top of this, as well as the Ftd would as well. If we check the options under scope, we have auto install, download task, and validate task. Auto install is another level that includes acknowledge, cancel, install, and show. We can acknowledge faults and primary. The primary includes fabric interconnects, though I'm not really sure why this is here, other than this may have been used for NXOS management. So we can install security packs by specifying the version. So let's go back up and try using the version from the previously shown packages. We see the system's current version as well as the CSP FTD version. Oddly, upgrading the ASA lowers our platform version to 2.9.1.136. This is the platform version of the ASA software. If we want to upgrade, we select yes. For this operation to upgrade firmware and software on the security platform components, it gives us some recommendations. Review current critical and major faults, as well as initiating a backup. You may want to do this when you're installing anything, like an upgrade to the Ftd software or installing the ASA software. Once we hit yes, we'll trigger the install of the software package. We can use show and show detail to show the upgrade progress. Issuing the show command gives us some info: firmware auto install package version, operational states, and upgrade state. Show detail gives us a little bit more, including the installation time. Keep in mind you will have to wait for the installation to start, as it's scheduled. Once the installation starts, you'll see the status from the console, erasing upgrade SPI prom, programming and then verifying upgrade SPI prom. We'll be told if ROMmon needs an upgrade, and then it will go through the erasure of ROMmon and then upgrade it. Once the BIOS has been locked, we boot up. We attempt to auto-boot the FXOS software, which once again, remember, FXOS is the base platform, and then we run ASA on top of that. We have success of the boot process, LFBFF signature and controller. It then starts udev and then goes through checking the file system. It does start the OpenBSD secure shell server and other various Linux items. The FXOS manager unlinks and deletes the old manager image and then starts installing the new image. It assigns an IP address to the ETH0 interface and sets up the HTTPD. It then creates the FXOS swap file and tells us there's an issue with the bundle version in firmware package. Keep in mind we will not really have to worry about this, as you'll see in a moment. Once we log on with the default user admin and set a password. Keep in mind password strength checks are enabled here. You must have at least an uppercase alphabetic character, one lowercase alphabetic character, and one non-alphanumeric or special character. It may seem that the install failed, but we get greeted with a log stating Cisco ASA, CMD install, CSP ID, and the file we installed previously. Once it is done, we can connect to the ASA or local management, so we'll try to connect to the ASA now. It shows us that the ASA application is not installed. Show package doesn't work. Show gives us certain options. Show FXOS mode tells us we are currently in platform. Show system shows us that we are in standalone mode with an IP address of 192.168.45.45. We see an entry verifying the signature of the ASA software image and a success of that verification. Even though we thought we messed something up, the Firepower appliance starts the ASA application. If we try to connect to the ASA application, it tells us that the ASA has not started yet, instead of previously where it said it was not installed. All of a sudden, our connection to FTD in the web page goes blank. Please wait for Cisco ASA to come online, and after a while, Cisco ASA started successfully. Please wait for Cisco ASA to come online. Now we see booting status. The ASA software automatically creates the management inside and outside security zones with security levels 0, 100, and 0 respectively. Now after all that, we're now at the Cisco ASA login screen. Pressing Ctrl A and then D will detach from this application of ASA. We type enable, or EN for short, and must input an enable password. We must either type write memory or copy running configuration, startup configuration to save the enable password upon reboot. You can simply type WR for short. So now let's look at the interfaces. Show interface IP brief. You'll notice out of the box we have an IP address assigned to VLAN 1, internal data 1/1, and management 1/1. 192.168.1.1, 169.254.1.1, which is the PIPA address, automatic private IP address feature, and 192.168.45.1. Upon entering configuration, Cisco asks that we send anonymous reporting. I'll say no for now. This reporting can be re-enabled later using the call home reporting anonymous command. Let's go into the management interface 1/1 to check its existing configuration. You may remember previously during setup, the system told us management zone security level was going to be set at 0, though here you can actually see it's set to 100. Let's configure an IP address that is accessible from my network, 10.0.10.253/24. We get a warning message that this overlaps with the Dhcp configuration, so the ASA clears any bindings and removes the address pool. Let's do a show run and see the configuration. VLAN 1 is set to security zone inside, ETH 1/1 is set to outside, which is also set to get an IP address automatically from DHCP server, as well as acquiring the default route from that DHCP server with the command IP address DHCP setroute. All you have to do is plug in your ISP or whatever interface into ETH 1/1 interface, and it will have connectivity and routing. We should also check on DHCP services and if NAT is configured. Lastly, management is set to security zone management. We see some DNS configurations. An object is already created called obj_any containing 0.0.0.0/0, and here we have an object NAT statement. One cool thing about the ASA is being able to take an object and directly configuring a NAT to it. In this case, we see that the object network obj_any has the NAT any to outside dynamic interface command. Basically, this NAT statement takes the object of any and dynamically NATs the traffic. Technically, it's considered PAT, or port address translation, as all interface addresses will map to a, I should say inside. Technically, it's considered PAT, or port address translation, as all inside addresses will map to a single outside address, the address of the outside interface, and use ports to map which clients are connecting where. I believe I created a NAT video previously, but if not, I can make a NAT video explaining. We see that HTTP has been enabled for use with ASDM, basically the GUI device manager of the ASA. HTTP is allowed from 192.168.45.0/24 subnet to the management interface, as well as the 192.168.1.0/24 subnet to the inside interface. What this means, you can only access the device manager on these interfaces and from the configured subnets. The same goes for SSH, but that isn't configured by default. Here you see the DHCP address pool for the inside network. When you plug in a computer or printer, etc. to the inside interface, you'll get an IP address from this pool. Lastly, a bunch of ASA stuff, not really relevant right now. We do need to check to see if an ASDM image is configured. Show run ASDM is empty, so we know there is no ASDM image configured. Doing a dir will show us the contents of disk 0. Show run SSH shows us the SSH configuration, and we are not allowing any traffic at this point. Let's add an HTTP allowed subnet. HTTP will allow the 10.0.0.0 to the management interface. We can configure various routing protocols such as router ERGRP1. We'll add the network 10.0.0.0 to the ERGRP protocol configuration, and show route tells us which routes we have. If you want to see a different routing table, such as management only, you need to specify. let's specify a static default route using the management interface with a gateway. Route management 0.0.0.0, 0.0.0.0, 10.0.10.1. So basically it's a default route with a gateway of 10.0.10.1. Show interface IP brief will remind us of the interface configurations. Once ready, the web page for ASA management will be accessible and require us to log in, though we have not created a user yet. So let's create an admin user. User admin priv15, user admin password, whatever, password. Once we log in, we get the option to install ASDM. Keep in mind the ASDM image wasn't listed in disk 0, so I'm not quite sure why this works, but hey, it does, we'll move forward. During the install of ASDM, we may get an error message saying that this software cannot run on Windows. This is because the shortcut gets the wrong path. We need to change the shortcut properties and remove a bunch of garbage. The installer should read c:\system32\wscript.exe, and you want to make sure to leave the rest of it as is. Once the shortcut is modified, we get to the ASDM IDM launcher and can now connect to the ASA. While we're waiting, I need you to understand one thing. The Firepower appliance runs the FXOS software. The ASA software is an application that runs on top of FXOS. The show version command will also show us the licensing applied to the ASA. So you get things like maximum VLANs, which is 60, unlimited inside hosts, no failover, encryption AES is disabled. We may have to worry about this later. 0 security contexts, 75 AnyConnect premium peers, no essentials, other VPN peers, and even AnyConnect for mobile is enabled. Okay, now we are connecting to the ASA using ASDM and we get a message. You have enabled HTTPS on a non-management only interface and not enabled encryption 3DES AES. If you configure a feature that can use strong encryption on this interface, and then the encryption DES license will be enforced on this interface, your management connection will drop and you will have to connect to the management-only interface. Apparently, there is a license needed to enable AES and strong encryption. Keep this in mind when changing to ASA from FTD, as SSL-based AnyConnect may be a problem, or it will use really bad encryption. Anyway, here we are in ASDM managing ASA on Firepower Appliance. If you would like a video on the ASA interface, I will most likely be creating one that will kind of match my introduction to Firepower and FTD. So now that we have ASA installed, let's see how to get back to the Ftd image. We must first download the Ftd image from software.cisco.com and upload it to the ASA. We can upload the file from ASDM by browsing the local flash. However, we were going to add the file here using the Tftp server and copy it to the ASA. Copy ftp:/10.0.100.100 Cisco FTD disk 0:/. Keep in mind this might not work, so you might have to type copy tftp disk 0 and then just fill out the information. After we have uploaded the file to the ASA, we can now type boot system disk 0:/ Cisco FTD and the rest of the file name. If you proceed, the system will be re-imaged and then reboot automatically into FTD, upgrading the platform and CSP. Now for the upgrade here, you're going to see a lot of the same stuff we saw before when installing the ASA. I will be playing around a little bit in the CLI here, but in the end, it loads up, I configure what it wants, and the FTD web page comes back online. I won't be talking for the rest of the time here, though at 21 minutes, things start happening. So that's how you install ASA and back on a Firepower 1010 appliance. Thanks for watching Intraz. I hope to see you all in my other IT-related videos. Later.